So then I found out the Earth is not 6,500 years old, and that kind of put a real big dent in the Bible. But I wasn't ready to give it up yet. I thought to myself, well, maybe it's just symbolic or some shit. Maybe it's not completely literally true, but most of it's true, right? I mean, Jesus still exists. That has to be true, right? So the next thing I did was to go look up Jesus to see what kind of historical evidence there was that Jesus actually existed. And of course, even I as a Christian knew that I couldn't use the Bible to justify the Bible being true. That's circular logic. So I had to go research for myself outside of the Bible and see what secular evidence there was to support the claim that Jesus was the Son of God, or that he even existed to begin with. And I went and researched this myself, and I did a ton of research, and I hope that you will also do the same exact research I did, because you will find out exactly what I did. The number one secular source that Christians give when you ask them that Jesus actually existed is a writing from a man named Josephus. Now, Josephus wasn't even alive when Jesus was crucified. So, right off the bat, that teaches us that the very best secular argument that Christians have that Jesus even existed to begin with came from a person who was not even alive when Jesus was. Somebody who could not have possibly ever laid eyes on Jesus. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking immediately. You're thinking, are you telling me that nobody during the life of Jesus ever wrote his name down? No, they didn't. Not a single person during the life of Jesus thought to write his name down. Which means Jesus ran around doing miracles. He had this huge following. He pissed off both the Romans and the Jews so much that they wanted him put to death. Yet not one of the many, many historians that lived in that area at that time thought to write his name down. In fact, Jesus did not write a single word down himself, and neither did any of his disciples. I mean, go research it for yourself, and you'll find out that even the biblical scholars, even scholars that believe the Bible is true, admit that they don't believe that the disciples actually really wrote the Bible themselves. Now, Bible scholars do believe that the disciples told scribes about the stories, and the scribes wrote it down, so they do believe that they were first-hand eyewitness accounts. But there's absolutely no evidence to back that up at all. Really, we have absolutely no idea who wrote any of the books of the Bible. We have no idea. But even the Christian scholars admit that the Bible stories weren't written down until at least 30 years after Jesus was crucified, and they weren't actually written down by the disciples, they were written down by other people. So what we're supposed to believe is that no one thought to write Jesus' name down one time ever during the entire time he lived, and no one thought to write a single word of him down until 30 years after he lived. So as you can see right off the bat, there's already huge flaws with this Jesus story. But let's return to Josephus real fast, which as I mentioned is the very best evidence outside of the Bible that a man named Jesus even lived to begin with. And I really hope that you'll go research this for yourself, because if you'll go research Josephus for yourself, what you'll find is that there are two mentions from Josephus about Jesus. One is a very brief mention that could have been talking about anybody named Jesus. Jesus was a very common name in those days. And the second one, which is the very best evidence that Christians have that Jesus existed to begin with, is known to be an interpolation. Now, what is an interpolation? Well, that is a fancy-ass Christian word for forgery. You see, some dude from the Catholic Church in the 4th century thought, hey, we need more evidence that Jesus existed because there's really not shit that really says that he existed. So this motherfucker forged Josephus' writings to make it look like Jesus existed. He even tried to make it look like Josephus was a believer in Jesus, which couldn't possibly be because Josephus was a Jew. So what you'll find is the very best evidence that Christians have outside of the Bible that Jesus existed is a known forgery, something that wouldn't hold up in any court of law in the land. And so we're supposed to take this and we're supposed to believe that this guy existed. So they're not even close to proving that a guy named Jesus even existed to begin with, much less all the obvious, ridiculous, bullshit fairy tales told about him are true. And so when I reached this point, Christianity was pretty much dead to me. It was really getting there, but I wasn't ready to give it up yet. I couldn't. It was just too big a part of my life. It had been with me for over 30 years, and I just couldn't let Christianity go like that. So I started thinking to myself, well, there's got to be more evidence than that. What about the places that actually exist in real life that exist in the Bible? I mean, we know for a fact that some of the places and some of the people that the Bible mentions really existed. So that means the Bible is right, doesn't it? But it didn't really take me that long to figure out why this argument is bullshit. I mean, even a child can understand why this argument is complete bullshit. Part of Harry Potter's book may take place in London, but just because London is real, that doesn't mean Harry Potter is true. I mean, even children understand that. You know, Spider-Man takes place in New York. It doesn't mean Spider-Man is true. I mean, let's look at Gone with the Winds. We know for a fact that Atlanta, Georgia exists. We know for a fact that the Union soldiers went into Atlanta and they burned the whole thing down. We know that that happened during the Civil War, just like the book Gone with the Wind said it did. But that does not mean that Gone with the Wind is a true story. It's not a true story. So even children can understand the flaw in this argument. Real people and places might be used in fictional stories, but that does not mean the fictional story is true. It's very simple. So at this point, the God in the Bible is on life support. I mean, he is dying fast, but I just couldn't let it go yet. So I was thinking there has to be some kind of evidence, something that proves the Bible to be true. So I thought, what about all the prophecies? Haven't there been lots and lots of prophecies the Bible prophesied about and they came true? So I went and researched the prophecies of the Bible, and what I found out is exactly what you'll find if you'll go research the prophecies of the Bible. Most of them are self-fulfilling prophecies, and I'll explain to you what I mean. Let's say that Harry Potter, in the very first chapter of the first book, makes 100 predictions. And now let's say that the author of Harry Potter dies. And then 100 years from now, a ghostwriter comes in and decides to write another Harry Potter book. And so the first thing that ghostwriter does is they go read the first Harry Potter book, and they see all the predictions that Harry Potter makes. And then in their book, they fulfill all those prophecies that Harry Potter made in his very first book. Now, just because an author in the future wrote that the prophecies that were in the first Harry Potter book came true, it doesn't mean that the author of the first Harry Potter book was somehow guided by God to write it. It's very simple to understand. The writer in the future simply read the past books and then wrote the new books to fulfill the prophecies of the old books. It doesn't take any kind of godly interference to make this happen. Duh! And that's pretty much what every single biblical prophecy is. None of them are specific at all. They're just complete and utter bullshit. So at this point, I can honestly say that the God of the Bible was pretty much dead to me. I realized that if the prophecies aren't true, and it can't even get basic details like the age of the earth true, and there's no real good evidence that Jesus was really existed or not, then there's no reason for me to believe all the rest of the bullshit, because the rest of the bullshit is obvious bullshit. You know, like an all-powerful God wanting to torture people for not following him, or talking snakes, or talking donkeys, or super cool long hair that gives some dude super magical powers. I mean, it's obviously all bullshit fairy tales, and if there's no evidence to back it up, why would anyone in their right mind believe it over any other fucking fairy tale? I mean, why would you believe the Bible over Islam, or Jack and the Beanstalk, or the story of Thor, or the Greek gods, or the Egyptian gods, or anything else? Why would you believe the Bible over anything else if there's no evidence? And if you go research it for yourself, you will find there's not any fucking evidence. And you know, I really think that any logical, rational, reasonable person that does exactly what I did, that goes out and researches these things one by one for themselves, will come to the exact same conclusion I did. And you'll do exactly the same thing I did. You will kill God, and when you do, believe me, you'll be happy that that motherfucker's dead. For thecultofdusty.com, I am Dusty Smith, and as always, until next time, logic.